Mom, can we get Hollow Knight Silksong?
We have Hollow Knight Silksong at home.
Hello indie game fans, here are upcoming games in my favourite genre, where I've dug deep and have 50 upcoming games here, so let's begin with Chiaroscuro, which, all jokes aside, does seem like a promising game despite the character design. In art, the term has to do with the strong contrast between light and dark, which you can evidently see here from the silhouetted characters, lighting and sporadic use of colour, looking to have decent combats as well. I suppose the games that developers play and consume will affect their own work as well, which appears to be the case here, but it might have some interesting ideas of its own. The initial target release window was June 2022 according to their Kickstarter, so I thought 2023 would be the year, but I don't think that's happening at this point, so next year might be more likely. Here's a deep cut in the gorgeously animated Soul Blade, a game that has an Eastern theme with swordplay as one of the main factors and looks gorgeous even based on screenshots alone, and is one of the smaller titles to keep an eye on. This video is brought to you by Everdeep Aurora, a very unique entry that might be considered Metroidvania adjacent, in which you play as a young feline child who awakens to find her mother missing, now having to drill downwards into the Everdeep in search of her. Of course, me being me, I have a soft spot for the throwback pixel art and colour palette chosen, having some awesome sprite work as well, but more interestingly, is a non-violent 2D exploration adventure title. From the UI and the map in the trailer in particular, this seems to be kind of like SteamWorld Dig, only where mysteries and exploration are the focus, in which you will meet an interesting cast of characters and also have to gather various key items in order to progress forward. As such, it is a very unique title that is worth your attention, so if interested, wishlist the game on Steam via the link in the description below. Here's a game which I'm more than happy to share, since Dewborne Dawn is a good looking Metroidvania that sure seems to have Hollow Knight inspiration, but has an interesting twist of its own in party members that you can recruit. These characters have their own stories and side quests, and once recruited, have unique abilities in combat, and while it may seem rather unfair to have 3-on-1 combat, it sure looks to complement the combo-heavy action that the developers are going for. There is a stamina or poise system, in which enemies, if exhausted, can be finished off with a one-hit KO, and I especially love it that the developers specifically talk about hidden hallways, breakable walls and such, since exploration is a key part of this genre. As of recording, this game is about 75% funded on Kickstarter with 9 days left to go, so you know what to do, support them if it is of interest. Here's a game which I came across on Twitter, where of course Ghost Hand got me with the art style and visuals, in which the rotating shot right at the very start of the trailer was the hook, and then added in gorgeous pixel art and PS1 era 3D background objects, and you certainly have my attention. There's also some 3D exploration in which you can fly into the background, which is fully formed, so on a technical basis, there is certainly a lot of wizardry going on here. Additionally, you're playing as a wizard's apprentice living on the moon in search of a father, who himself is a powerful mage, setting up the character's motivations, with the combat here looking interesting as well. Developer Danny Gray released Toziuha Knight, Dracula's Revenge in 2022, which was a classic Vania title, and the follow-up to that is Toziuha Knight, Order of the Alchemists, which is supposed to be more of a modern Metroidvania, but retains the old-school pixel art style, down to having no facial details on the character in gameplay. From the movement of the character, the whip, and especially the backdash, I believe it is going for Symphony of the Night vibes, and hey, we could always use more classic Castlevania-inspired titles, so this gets on the list. Here's a deep cut in Faye Freelance Rebel Reporter, a self-styled Newsvania title set in the year 27XX, in which the genocidal President Captain Evil has declared all news to be illegal, with anyone possessing, reading, producing or contributing in any part to the news being killed, with of course our protagonist fighting against this great evil. It is a gorgeous pixel art title with awesome looking combat, in which our heroine, comically large fountain pen in hand, fights back against these enemies, having additional trinkets like a camera to stun your enemies, or even being able to change the nib of the pen for new abilities, being a wholly unique twist on the formula. This next title has been in development for quite a while, where The Light of the Darkness Renascence, I believe, has changed its title since we last took a look, but it looks to be a grimdark title worth keeping an eye on. Set in a world of conflict between the forces of light and darkness, play as a hybrid, born of both, but yet shunned by either side, having to find your own way in this cursed world. It looks good visually, with the wings surprisingly being functional since it allows the character to fly short distances or to hover in combat, looking to be a rather epic title that has potential as well. I've covered SELINI in the past, and since then, they've launched and successfully funded their Kickstarter campaign, so I would have to assume that development is going full speed ahead with this moody title. It is set in a very foggy wasteland, with the central narrative being told in an obfuscated way, having an ancient spaceship, abandoned machines, robo-replicants, a deserted fishing boat, and more to interact with. It has a mysterious tone and gives off limbo vibes, but there is combat and bosses coming to us from a father-son team and looks interesting. Rune Fencer Illyia has been delayed from one year to the next, but I have a feeling that 2024 will finally be the year. You play as a young runist with the ability to use runic magic in a variety of clever ways, searching for her missing twin sister after the airship they were travelling on crash lands in a fallen kingdom. While the pixel art isn't the most impressive, it seems to have plenty of ambition in terms of gameplay, since you can forge runic magic into different weapons and can also use runes to augment your abilities. There is plenty of enemy variety, as well as additional systems like cooking, freezing time, and more. Ceplion was originally scheduled for 2023 but has since been delayed, where this pixel art Metroidvania looks neat and, more interestingly, has a protagonist who primarily wields a crossbow, which is a fun weapon in games. The medieval fantasy world looks fairly standard here but is rendered beautifully, with sections of bullet hell and precision platforming required as well. It is from a solo developer who has been posting updates on Twitter, so development seems to be going well, so hopefully this releases soon as well. A game which had a successful Kickstarter campaign recently is Reign in the Abyss, raising about twice its target to the tune of $24,000, in which this pixel art Metroidvania with an anthropomorphic protagonist looking kind of neat. Most interestingly, instead of being a pure Metroidvania, it is supposed to have survival horror elements as well, although I don't know how that would be implemented, but it is certainly a curiosity of note. The big news about BIOMORPH is that it is releasing in Q1 2024, a game which appears to be inspired by Hollow Knight as well, but where the gimmick is that you will be able to transform into defeated enemies. These enemies then form parts of the Metroidvania style progression as you use their abilities to break through barriers or to get into inaccessible locations, looking like it has the potential for serious sequence breaking and should hide plenty of secrets. Due to all the Hollow Knight inspired titles, there is certainly a clamoring for a return to Metroid and sci-fi, and I even saw a comment the other day on my video about someone being sick of melee focused Metroidvanias, so I'm happy to share Moadra, a very grimdark looking title set on an alien world with grotesque enemies. If you're familiar with Grime, more on that later, this has a similar vibe with how gross everything is, especially enemies and bosses, with the predator looking main character having an interesting design as well. The developer talks about a free-form progression system with some RPG-like elements and choice of upgrades, which will be critical as you explore the world in search of something dark and terrifying buried deep beneath the planet. However, this developer hasn't posted anything since February 2023, so that might be concerning, or they might just be heads down in development, so stay tuned and I'll let you know if there's any news. Developer Bestie Games had decent success with their first Metroidvania, Lone Fungus, and rather than making the mistake of completely switching genres, they have doubled down with Lone Fungus 2, varying up the pixel art style and sprite size, but is a prequel to the first game. Prequels get a bad rap since people already know what's going to happen, but perhaps it is not as much of an issue in games as compared to movies or TV, since gameplay is king and there should be fun to be had here. From the early footage, it does appear that it is more Castlevania-like in nature rather than Hollow Knight, in which our hero, Green Cap, has access to a variety of weapons like a whip and throwing axe, which has a familiar arc to it, and I wonder if there will be returning features like the different mushroom caps that our hero can equip. This pixel art title immediately shot up my wishlist since Altered Alma looks kind of sick, being set in Neo Barcelona, which is a cyberpunk version of the historic city. Our heroine is battling criminal kingpins and has some violent execution animations which are on par with Blasphemous or The Last Faith, but curiously, from the description, the developers talk about finding love or just exploring the beautiful cityscape, so structurally the game might be quite different, but it's certainly one to watch. I've had my eye on Dewdrop Dynasty since it had a wonderful minimalist pixel art style coming to us from YouTuber GoodGiz, although I do think that this isn't the latest trailer since he has made videos about altering the look of the game. Still, it had a successful Kickstarter campaign in 2022 and looks interesting since you play as a bee who just wants to get home, but has interesting locations like the cheese mines and different insect NPCs to get to know, with this hopefully releasing next year as well. Celeste but Guns can be the shorthand way of describing A Sister's Journey, a pixel art Metroidvania that combines precision platforming with combat and looks pretty good. I do wonder what the balance will be like between combat and platforming since the trailers are leaning heavily towards the latter, but screenshots and GIFs on the store page do show off more combat. Also, in precision platformers like Celeste or Meat Boy, those are fairly linear and have you progressing forward, so I wonder if there is an interconnected world, since, again, due to features like collapsing blocks, I don't think you'll be able to backtrack all that easily, but that is precisely why this title is a curiosity. Here's a new, never-before-seen game on the channel in Eden's Guardian, which, if you were not able to tell from the opening notes of the trailer, seems to be a Blasphemous-like title in both look and presentation. You know the drill by now, it is set in a grimdark medieval fantasy world in which the gods and humans are in conflict, and you play as a guardian attempting to uncover some dark secrets. The pixel art is fantastic, and has a blink dagger-like main mechanic which looks interesting, but if you love Metroidvanias, this looks like a no-brainer. AWAKEN Astral Blade has changed quite a bit since it was first announced, so much so that the design of the main protagonist has completely changed, but where this grimdark Metroidvania with sci-fi elements does still look pretty interesting. It reminds me of Vigil the Longest Night visually, but is more of a classic Metroidvania rather than having a Souls-like influence in which the massive, horrific bosses and stylish action appears to take center stage. It has an interesting mix of influences and themes, and also has a release window of Q2 2024, and given how long it has been in development, stands a good chance of releasing. Another new game which I've been saving for this video is Symphonia, a musically themed title in which you're exploring the world, reactivating musical machinery, and gathering an orchestra to bring the world back to life.
It was at this moment that he knew. He f***ed up.
Okay, so now that I'm looking at this, it might not be a Metroidvania at all since it's a non-violent game without combat, so that might disqualify it, being more on the precision platforming end of things, but there is an interconnected world with backtracking, so let me know in the comments if you think this is a Metroidvania, but it's still a gorgeous game to watch. The long-in-development pixel art parkour title Savior has been on my watchlist since it looks awesome, with the fluid movement and parkour moves that the character can do being the highlight, in addition to the world that has both medieval fantasy elements like dragons as well as futuristic robots. It was kickstarted in 2019 and has been a long time coming, but the developer has been attempting to hire more people to help with the completion of the game. So hopefully it is soon, but it might not be good news if they're still looking for help at this stage of development, so fingers crossed it turns out well. Another game which perhaps questioned the definition of a Metroidvania is Animal Well, an exploration-focused title without direct combat in which you play as a little slime creature exploring this mysterious labyrinth. I say indirect since you're able to use the environment to your advantage to get rid of enemies, but the exploration and secrets will be the main draw. Where according to publisher Big Note, which is headed up by YouTuber Donkey, there will be years and years of secrets in this game and might become a cult classic. Since we last took a look at Akatori, it has undergone a stark visual transformation, swapping pure pixel art to 2D sprites against 3D background objects and has an interesting look, although based on the comments, some of you really hate it, so let's see where this game ends up. A Metroidvania with an amazing art style is Silent Santicado, one that uses an intentionally limited colour palette in which you travel through a fallen kingdom attempting to lift a curse and is also one of interest. Gestalt, Steam and Cinder has steadily been falling a couple of spots every year that it remains on the list, since my hype has been steadily decreasing as well, in that while this steampunk Metroidvania looks gorgeous, it sure seems to have run into issues during development, so I have no idea what is happening. Their latest post was in February 2023, which announced their Steam Next Festival demo, which is good, so I guess the plan was to release in 2023, but it has since been pushed again. It was announced in 2022 that YouTubers and streamers Jesse Cox, Dex Bonus and The Completionist were now producing the game, but with the latest charity scandal that Gerard is involved in, I think that this game gets pushed way down the priority list, but the Steam page does put 2024, so we'll have to wait and see. If one too many pixel art titles have been getting your eyes to glaze over, how about the art style of ULTROS, a weird and trippy looking psychedelic title set in the Sarcophagus, a cosmic uterus which contains an ancient demon, so how's that for a unique premise? It looks very weird and perhaps a little too busy visually on screen, so much so that it is difficult to see what's going on, being difficult to differentiate between platforms, enemies, projectiles, background objects and more, but unique is always good and seems to have a pretty firm release date in February 2024. An impressive looking, long in development title is Fallen Tier The Ascension, coming to us from a Filipino developer, so Southeast Asia represents. It is a gorgeous hand-drawn title with some great art and animations, in which our hero is a mysterious young boy on a quest to uncover his past, but has a darker power within. In some ways, this reminds me of Indivisible since you can recruit various party members, but crucially does not switch into Valkyrie profile style turn-based combat, but where party members can then become additional attacks and abilities in combat like Dewborne Dawn covered earlier in this video. It is supposed to have an open world, non-linear structure with over 40 hours of gameplay, which is impressive for an indie game, but the scope and ambition of this means that it's taking quite a while to be made, but the developers are actively posting updates, so here's wishing them all the best. Another new title that I want to shout out is Hayaku, Island of Darkness, a retro-style Metroidvania that looks fantastic, in which our hero explores a mysterious island full of danger and monstrous creatures. They have absolutely nailed the throwback look, akin to Mega Man or Shovel Knight, with 12 different weapons to choose from, and even weapon leveling progression and armor parts that you can mix and match, so inject that nostalgia hit right in my veins, please. Remember when I said that people were complaining about too many melee Metroidvanias? How about Rebel Transmute instead? In that this is perhaps as Metroid as it can get without infringing copyright, in which our heroine Moon Mikono explores a living planet in search of her long-lost mother. There are twisted sci-fi experiments to fight against, as well as being able to reprogram and augment your abilities, allowing customization that will suit your playstyle. Needless to say, the pixel art is fantastic with the tweaks and features that you would expect of a modern game in this genre, such as being able to put pins on the map, with the developer's latest post on Kickstarter dated 1st December 2023 stating looking forward to the release, so 2024 looks more likely than ever. Here's a new set of games to the channel which I'm excited about, beginning with the beauty cult's Nectarmancer, which, if I'm not wrong, was first announced as just Nectarmancer, being a self-styled Gardenvania, so I wonder what that is all about. Still, it has an interesting pixel art look that uses modern visuals with modern tweaks like depth, perspective, and an interesting camera placement to give it a unique look, certainly being one of interest as well. Now, this next title is one of the most gorgeous Metroidvanias that I've come across, in which Twilight Monk appears to be Hollow Knight inspired as well, but as one of the biggest names in video game art behind it. The developer, Tren Kanuga, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, worked on Fortnite, Overwatch, World of Warcraft, Diablo 3 and League of Legends, so to say that the pedigree is good is an understatement, even having a YouTube channel with over 300,000 subscribers, so go check it out as well. You play as the last of the ancient Kung Fu warriors battling or enslaving demons, attempting to fight your way through to destroy the portals that spawn these monsters, and looks absolutely sick, so let's hope the gameplay will match. There isn't an official trailer for Sheep Lad just yet, but this Zelda 2 style adventure RPG looks awesome, nailing that throwback look. Our hero is searching for his older sister, but has to adventure across the world in order to do so, with the deliberate combat appearing to be a highlight, and where the developer has shown overworld exploration as well, so it's not exactly a Metroidvania in the modern sense, but is still adjacent enough to be of interest. There was a huge blow-up between the developer of Immortal and the Death That Follows and their publisher Limestone Games back in 2021, in which the team claims that they were subjected to endless crunch, were not paid for their work, and had their IP stolen, with their game falling very flat, and the original team having moved on to making their own IP independently. When it was first revealed, I wasn't sure what they were going for, since while it looked sick, even now, their store page states that it's a roguelite beat-em-up, but according to their Twitter and latest playtest, they've switched to a fully formed Metroidvania, so confusion aside, it's a gorgeous game that's worth keeping an eye on. Year after year, Hard 4th Alicia remains on the list without too much news, and people are understandably upset since this game was kickstarted at least 8 years ago, with some comments calling this a scam that will never be released. However, the developer has been posting updates and showing progress, and may just have severely underestimated how much work it would be, so I say let it ride for now. As mentioned in the upcoming Simulator Games video, it is not uncommon for indie games to be in development for 10 years, but I completely understand backer frustration since this pixel art title looks awesome, with magic spells and attacks looking good, so here's to another year of waiting for more news. May your patience be very thick. I've had my eye on The Siege and the Sandfox for quite a while, since this self-styled Stealthvania title appears quite unique, in which you can use various tools and traps to get rid of your enemies, but are never seen in direct confrontation or combat with them. It was in development for quite a while, and then went radio silence, and then resurfaced, having since signed with publisher PlayOn, formerly known as Koch Media, but it is still under the Embracer Group banner, which has been hit with layoffs, so I don't know if this is affected, with the Steam page still stating 2023 as of recording, so I'm guessing it's a 2024 release at this stage. Here's a neat looking title in Anima Flux, a co-op focused Metroidvania in which you might not exactly be the good guys. You play as two genetically enhanced soldiers working for a theocratic dictatorial regime sent to a desolate city to fight off swarms of mutants to save what's left of humanity there. The co-op focus is interesting, although I don't know how it will work in single player, but there's a good amount of hype, so why not add it to your wishlist as well. Here's an awesome looking title that not many people know about in Exile, which when we last took a look, still had not launched its Kickstarter campaign, which was in June 2023, although unfortunately it was unsuccessful. But the message from the developer says that he recognizes the concerns and issues and is looking to revamping the title a little and trying again later with a new demo, sending it out in advance and actually doing some marketing on the game prior to relaunching the campaign, so I hope he manages to figure it out since this game looks awesome. Here's another new title that is really pretty in Constance, one that has you playing as a paintbrush-wielding artist attempting to escape a decaying inner world created by her own declining mental health. It looks to touch upon subjects and topics that I'm all too familiar with since honestly, this year has been pretty rough for me, where it looks like the absolutely gorgeous visuals will help melt some of those concerns away, and despite the cutesy look, might be quite the challenge as well. We have had a number of titles attempting to include precision platforming elements in them, with the self-styled Celestoidvania title Lucid being of interest. You play as one of the few remaining sentinels who must travel the treacherous landscape in order to fulfill a solemn promise, having decent-looking combat and challenging platforming. They recently had a successful Kickstarter campaign, so it looks like it's full steam ahead with development, so here's wishing them all the best. This next title is a wild one since Turbo Kid is based on a Canadian movie of the same name from 2015 and seems like such a weird choice for a so-called licensed game, but the interesting part is that our protagonist travels around on a BMX bike with special abilities to help in exploration, such as anti-gravity tires that are used to stick to the ceilings. Unfortunately for them, they might have been beaten to the punch by Laika Age Through Blood, the self-styled Motorvania title with combat on a motorcycle, but this game still looks kind of interesting. The combat in this, however, does appear to be on foot, where the bike is mainly used for exploration, but the huge ramps and the sick jumps that you can make look pretty fun, and given how long it has been in development, 2024 should be the year, right? I've had my eye on Being and Becoming due to what else but the gorgeous pixel art, so indie developers, if you want my attention, you know what to do. You play as the lucid dreamer in a kingdom corrupted by the collective dream, having to battle and consume the souls of the corrupted, and to use this power to free the world from eternal slumber. I absolutely love the look of this, having an interesting character design with the old school diver helmet, a weapon on a chain, which has some great animations and some fantastic backgrounds as well, although I'm not sure how far along in development it is and might be a ways off since I've heard that they are planning a Kickstarter campaign. Here's another awesome looking grimdark title with perhaps a little bit of a Souls-like twist in Mandragora, in which you enter the realm of entropy and battle all sorts of monsters in order to rip apart reality, having a very successful Kickstarter campaign and should be great. Speaking of Souls-like Metroidvanias, the wholly unique world of Grime returns in the sequel, changing up the gimmick just enough to be of interest as well. In the first game, you played as a living black hole with the ability to absorb an enemy to use their mass for upgrades, but in this sequel, you are now able to launch tendrils from your hands to absorb enemies and to summon molds in their shape. The world of Rock and Root returns, in which the enemies here are formed not of eldritch monstrosities, but of these materials instead, giving it a very unnerving feel, with the original having horrific enemy designs, which looks to continue in this game based on the trailer footage. Good news everyone! The long-in-development Momodora Moonlit Farewell has a confirmed release date and is very early in January, looking to be the first major indie release of the year. As is tradition in this series, you play as a maple leaf-wielding priestess attempting to save her people, having to battle all sorts of monsters and giant ladies in order to do so. I quite like Reverie Under the Moonlight, so of course this is of note, and where you do not need to have prior knowledge of the other games. It's a little bit bittersweet as well, since apparently this will be the last entry in the series, so I hope it goes out with a bang and wish the developer all the best. Speaking of sequels, I was pleasantly surprised to find out about the announcement of Time Spinner 2 Unwoven Dream from the YouTube comments as well, so please keep them coming to be my eyes and ears. This is the direct sequel to Time Spinner, which is underrated all things considered, in which the orb-based combat system returns, which is fairly unique. The original had a number of powers like the ability to freeze time so that you could use enemies as platform to get up onto a higher ledge, although that isn't shown in this trailer, but given the pedigree, it's certainly one to watch, but let's hope it does not take the 9 years or whatever that it took the original game to be made. One of the prettiest in-development Metroidvanias is Bow Path of the Teal Lotus, one that has a world and art style inspired by Japanese folklore and looks awesome. I've had hands-on with the demo of this at a convention and it feels great to play, having elements of both Hollow Knight and Ori in it. It was a vertical slice however, so I didn't get too much of a feel of the story, but the combat and platforming feels good so far, and where I believe a playable demo should be out soon, so be sure to keep an eye on this. The next game from the developer of Touhou Lunar Nights and Record of Lodos War, Delit in Wonder Labyrinth is titled Blade Chimera, one that sports a similar kind of pixel art style but has an occult-inspired cyberpunk setting instead. What that appears to mean is that it meshes together elements from classic Japanese folklore like frog demons and I guess Japanese yokai like Tengu and Baku in more of a cyberpunk dystopia, looking awesome with a slick Sephiroth looking main character as well. Speaking of pixel art, of course I have to give mention to Mariachi Legends, which is my most anticipated pixel art title since it's from the developer of 9 Years of Shadows, which looked visually impressive, so they're taking another swing in the genre that they are hoping will turn out well for them. Play as a detective who makes a pact with Lady Death, gaining power and transforming into La Sombra to fight off enemies in exchange for having to help her with a little favour in dealing with an immortal, with the animations and combat looking absolutely sick here. Honestly, one of my most anticipated titles is Crow Sworn, and while people have knocked it for having a visual style that is too similar to Hollow Knight, I do think it's differentiated enough to be its own thing. The addition of guns is one of the more interesting aspects, since your enemies do have access to those as well, and add in a scythe, and of course you have my attention. This had a massively successful Kickstarter campaign to the tune of $1.25 million, with the original target being 2023, so hopefully 2024 will be the year. Of course, Hollow Knight Silksong is number 1, being the most anticipated indie game, and mark my words, this will be an absolutely gigantic launch, which will give the developers more money than God again. The follow-up to Hollow Knight has you playing as Honnet, who was a boss and NPC from that game, only this time she's ascending a haunted kingdom as compared to the dank darkness of the ruined kingdom of Hello Nest, in an interesting mirroring of themes. The rumour on the grapevine is that this was supposed to release this year, sometime in June or July, but of course has been delayed, so 2024 looks more likely than ever, and whenever it releases, do expect the internet to explode. And can you imagine if you get both Silksong and Crow Sworn in the same year? Absolute madness, I tell you, and I cannot wait. Want more Metroidvanias? Watch this video for my recommendations of the best.